perhaps one last line of thought that could be produced regarding the nature of Ukraine and its background and all those things is that it hasn't really distinguished itself on the world stage or as a people and a culture in the time since it became independent from the Soviet Union 30 odd years ago. And I was just an intense observer, let's put it that way, of that part of the world, and also studied it in college and in school to some extent in general, and also just a lot of reading. So I've been interested and observed this place and also the process of it becoming an independent nation. And one of the first things they did was to harken back to Russia and to link Russia to the Great Famine and some of the terrible repressions that were in fact visited upon Ukraine during the 30s mainly, and maybe then after that too. Um, and so there was a desire for vengeance, particularly from Western Ukrainians. So, and that would tend to be, those are the people who were not as Russified and not as Western in nature, even though they're farther west geographically. But they really wanted revenge against Russia for the wrongs that were done to the Ukrainian people before and during World War II. So that was just a bit of a red flag to look at. Also, one thing that I experienced was when they were trying to decide what to do with the nuclear weapons that had been placed upon Ukrainian soil, today's Ukrainian soil. And there were a lot of them, and they were controlled by the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union had broken up. Russia was in terribly weak shape. And so, what was going to happen to these nuclear weapons, these many nuclear weapons and other military gear? And of course, there were a lot of people speaking up for that revenge. We will be Ukraine. We will be a great people. We will seek vengeance. We will go to war with Russia. It was a very negative conversation. Okay, with justification, but not what we needed to hear at that time. And what came into that? We hear now that there was this, what was it, the Minsk Accord, where we signed an agreement to protect Ukraine from some sort of incursion or hostility by Russia. And the idea is that it was just that. But really, what was told to me by some of the significant players of that process at the time, what was expressed to me was that Russia, the United States, Britain, I think, maybe others as well, maybe France as well, I'm not sure, but that they were just all terrified that this huge, massive, highly evolved weaponry would fall into the hands of these people. And I think it came out of the Bush administration, suicidal nationalism. So you really didn't usually get many very clever phrases from President Bush one, but suicidal nationalism was a pretty good little moniker to put on this process. And if they had been given this huge stockpile of nuclear weaponry, people were just terrified that all of that would fall into the hands of the Ukrainians, particularly, I'm sorry to say, the Western Ukrainians. So I may get may suffer some damage from saying that, but that's the case. And so they all were interested at that time in making sure that weaponry was turned over to Russia. That was the, the physical, or um, that was the only solution that they could see. And I don't know that Russia was particularly seeking it, except that they didn't want it to be taken over and then turned immediately upon them and their people. So that was the background for the ultimate treaty. That we're going to, we will guarantee security for Ukraine, and they will turn over the nuclear weapons to Russia. And Russia was in such a weak state at that point. I'll say again, we said that a little bit earlier, that we really didn't, and we had the mutually assured destruction before that between the U.S. and Russia in terms of nuclear weapons, that if they had attacked us, we would have attacked them back and destroyed them. And so Russia was just in no position. It had no desire to attack the United States, I think, at that point, in any way, shape, or form. And at the beginning, it didn't have much desire to attack Ukraine. So the weaponry was turned over to Russia out of fear of Ukraine and a general fear of Ukraine being armed with nuclear weapons. And there was another a survey that I heard about. I'm not sure exactly who did it, but someone did a survey of people in Poland immediately after the independence and the breakup of the Soviet Union. And the question, as I understood it, was who do you fear most? Russia, an independent Russia, or Germany? And of course, World War II had been just unbelievable devastation had been visited upon Poland and the Polish people. So that was a legitimate question. Which of these two do you fear most? And as it was explained to me, the result from this survey, this broad national population survey in Poland, was that they feared Ukraine. Interestingly, or similarly, excuse me, I should say, there was a survey by World Bank after Ukrainian independence, and the purpose of that was to find this emerging, what was really emerging entrepreneurial business class, some independent businesses, free markets sort of thing, assets being taken over from the government by admirable entrepreneurial people, and there were real businesses starting to emerge. So World Bank put together a big sample and just to see what are they up to, what do they think, and so on and so forth. And so there was a very scientific survey done, and that was interesting by World Bank. But one thing they also did, they asked the people being surveyed to respond, or just to give them an independent idea, something that they wanted to tell the outside world, and something that they wanted to tell World Bank, and that was just from their own gut. And there were two things, and I really apologize. I wish I could remember the second one, but the first one was, please do not give any money to our government, or just don't give any money to our government. And so all these gut reactions, the fear of the world of a nuclear armed Ukraine, the hatred of Ukraine, some Ukrainians toward Russia, and the desire to harm them, also to starve them out of all the Ukrainian food. Ukraine had a big surplus of food. Much of that went over to Russia during the Soviet system. And again, just them thinking back to the starvation, the forced starvation of Ukraine in the 1930s. And, we'll show them, we'll get them back. They starved us. We'll starve them, and they can't have any of our precious food. So there was just this whole mixture of things, the possible latent fear of Ukraine in Poland, the fear of a nuclear armed Ukraine, the fear of the Ukrainian people that we, or at least the World Bank, would give large sums of money to their government, and they didn't want that at all. So it was a mixture of things that didn't really portend for good times ahead. And of course, we've seen the tremendously intense corruption and the economic failure that has resulted in the conduct of the war really should give us more and more pause about this long-term, tight, happy, friendly relations between or alliance, marriage between Ukraine and the United States. So that just shouldn't happen, regardless of the, or with or without the warnings that came from George Washington in his farewell address.